Storm-Falcon? You've got to be kidding me. Sergeant First Class Dominic Crestwood's voice thundered across Nevada's Joint Special Operations Training Complex like a mortar round finding its target. His 6'4" frame cast a shadow that swallowed the woman, standing at the equipment station whole, and 150 SEALs and Delta Force operators turned in unison to witness what promised to be the morning's entertainment. Phones emerged from cargo pockets with practiced efficiency, red recording lights blinking like predatory eyes in the desert sun. "What's your next call sign going to be, Sparkle Unicorn? Rainbow Butterfly?" Crestwood snatched the tactical cap from her head with deliberate slowness, savoring the gesture, revealing long neon blue hair that tumbled past her shoulders in waves that caught the harsh Nevada light. "Get this fashion model off my range before she breaks a nail." The laughter erupted like artillery fire across open ground. Someone near the ammunition station shouted, "Wrong turn, sweetheart. The nail salon is 3 miles east." Another voice joined the chorus from somewhere near the observation deck. "Did Instagram lose one of their influencers?" Specialist Ren Ashford stood motionless. 5'4", 118 pounds of what every operator present dismissed as obvious miscasting. Her porcelain skin seemed almost translucent in the brutal desert morning, defined cheekbones catching shadows that belonged on magazine covers rather than military installations. Gray-green eyes that should have been filling with tears remained absolutely steady as Crestwood's massive hand crushed her cap and tossed it into the dust like garbage. "Designated marksman position?" He read from her assignment papers with theatrical disbelief, each word dripping with contempt thick enough to taste. "For the joint exercise, this has to be a clerical error. Some secretary probably fat-fingered the database. We don't let Instagram influencers play with real weapons, princess." Lieutenant Vera Hollister descended from the observation platform with the measured stride of someone who had clawed her way into the special operations community through years of blood and political maneuvering. Her blonde ponytail swayed like a metronome, counting down to judgment, as she examined Ren with the kind of contempt usually reserved for contaminated equipment. "Honestly, this is embarrassing for all of us." Hollister's voice carried the practiced disappointment of someone who had perfected the art of concerned authority. "Someone call admin and fix this mistake before we become a viral joke. Bad enough we have to deal with diversity quotas without them sending us actual liabilities." But Master Chief Garrison Thorne, watching from his elevated position near the command post, noticed something that made 55 years of hard-won instinct prickle along his spine. The way Ren retrieved her cap from the dust wasn't the movement of a humiliated civilian. Those calloused hands, the precise economy of motion, the way her weight settled automatically into a balanced stance that could absorb impact or generate explosive force. He had seen those patterns before, in operators who had killed in places that didn't exist on any official map. "Don't teach me something I already wrote." Ren's voice emerged barely above a whisper, almost lost in the continuing mockery swirling around her like desert wind. Crestwood laughed harder, the sound harsh and genuine in its cruelty. He turned back to his phone camera, making sure his 3,000 live viewers caught every angle of the confrontation. "Did you hear that, everyone? Princess here thinks she wrote the manual." He gestured dramatically at the massive sniper rifle mounted on the range table, its matte black finish absorbing light like a hole cut in reality. "Right, and I'm secretly a 4-star general." In exactly 47 minutes, every person laughing would understand the magnitude of their catastrophic error in judgment. The morning sun climbed higher over the sprawling complex that served as joint training ground for America's most elite special operations units. Heat shimmer rose from concrete in waves that distorted distant targets into dancing mirages, and the temperature had already pushed past 95 degrees with the promise of worse to come. This wasn't a place that tolerated weakness in any form, and the 150 operators assembled for the International Joint Warfare Exercise represented the absolute pinnacle of military capability from 17 NATO nations. Colonel Sterling Whitmore would emerge from the administrative building with the rigid posture of a man who had spent 30 years believing that proper documentation equaled proper soldiers. Silver eagles gleamed on his collar as he approached the growing crowd, drawn by the commotion like a shark sensing disturbance in familiar waters. "What's the situation here?" His voice carried the flat authority of someone accustomed to immediate compliance. Crestwood snapped to something approaching attention, though his smirk remained firmly in place. "Sir, we appear to have a paperwork malfunction. This civilian somehow got assigned to our designated marksman rotation." Whitmore accepted the documents from Crestwood's outstretched hand, examining them with the intensity of a forensic accountant searching for fraud. His eyebrows climbed steadily higher as he read, stopping occasionally to re-examine certain passages as if they might change under sufficient scrutiny. These qualifications? He looked up at Wren with undisguised skepticism. Various classified programs. That's not documentation, specialist, that's creative writing. Where exactly did you earn these supposed certifications? Various locations, sir. Wren's tone remained neutral, offering nothing. Various locations. Whitmore repeated the words slowly, testing them for hidden meaning and finding only obstruction. How wonderfully specific. And these instructors who allegedly certified your competency, I suppose they're unavailable for verification. Some of them are deceased, sir. Others are currently deployed to locations I'm not authorized to discuss. The answer hung in the air like an unexploded ordnance, dangerous in its implications but ultimately dismissed as obvious fabrication. Whitmore handed the papers back to Crestwood with a shake of his head that communicated everything words couldn't adequately express. Process her through standard verification channels. If anything checks out, which I sincerely doubt, we'll revisit the assignment. Until then, she observes only. The disrespect you're witnessing right now is about to backfire in ways these arrogant operators can't possibly imagine. This woman with the ridiculous call sign is hiding something that will make every single person on that range question everything they thought they knew about capability. Smash that like button if you believe real warriors don't advertise their deadliest skills. Subscribe now, because what happens next will absolutely destroy you. Range, Master Beckett, Cole approached with clipboard in hand, his weathered face creased with the particular concern of someone who had spent 20 years managing situations that could turn lethal in an instant. He had processed thousands of operators through this facility, developed an almost supernatural ability to spot trouble before it fully materialized, and everything about the current situation screamed liability in capital letters. Ma'am, according to this paperwork, you're requesting a standard-issue training rifle? He double-checked the notation, certain he must have misread. Not one of the competition-grade systems. That's correct. Wren moved toward the equipment table, where a single rifle sat apart from the others, like an outcast at a social gathering, while the competition weapons gleamed with pristine condition and advanced optics worth more than most civilian automobiles. Her assigned rifle looked like it had survived multiple wars and emerged from each one slightly more battered than before. Technical Sergeant Boyd Mercer watched the exchange from his position near the ammunition station, his face a mask of carefully constructed neutrality that concealed the storm raging behind his eyes. 47 years old, with weathered features that mapped decades of hard service, he recognized Wren the moment she stepped onto the range. Recognized her, and felt his stomach drop through the desert floor. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to be anywhere. The official records clearly stated that Specialist Wren Ashford had died in Syria 3 years ago, her name carved into a memorial wall that Mercer had visited exactly once before the grief became unbearable. Lieutenant Hollister appeared at his elbow with the silent precision of a predator who had identified weakness. Her whisper carried just enough menace to transform casual conversation into unmistakable threat. Sergeant Mercer, I understand you have a distinguished career, 23 years, exemplary service record, pension vesting in just 14 months. She paused, letting the implications settle like sediment in still water. It would be unfortunate if certain photographs from your deployment to Thailand surfaced at an inopportune moment. The kind of photographs that tend to end careers regardless of context or explanation. Mercer's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. What do you want? Simply your cooperation in ensuring that unqualified personnel don't compromise legitimate training operations. When the moment comes, you'll support the consensus that this woman doesn't belong here. Nothing more complicated than that. He wanted to refuse. Every instinct screamed that he was about to participate in something fundamentally wrong. But 14 months stood between him and the pension that would support his wife through her cancer treatment, the financial security that represented his only remaining contribution to a family he had neglected for 2 decades of deployments. Fine. The word tasted like ash in his mouth. Hollister's smile didn't reach her eyes. Excellent. I knew you'd see reason. Wren had begun her equipment inspection with movements that caught Thorne's attention like a flare in darkness. Her hands moved across the degraded rifle with practiced efficiency, checking bolt operation, trigger function, and sight alignment with the kind of muscle memory that spoke of thousands upon thousands of repetitions. But it was the specific patterns that made his instincts sing with recognition. 3 fingers at the base, thumb and index forming a support structure that maximized stability while maintaining instant access to the trigger. Combat breathing that slowed her heart rate visibly, the pulse at her throat dropping from normal rhythm to something that approached hibernation. Weight distribution that could shift from passive observation to explosive action without any telegraphing movement. He had seen those patterns exactly once before, in a classified briefing about a unit that didn't officially exist. A unit whose members were identified only by designations that sounded like mythology rather than military terminology. Block 3 variant. Ren's voice carried just loud enough for nearby observers to hear. 2019 production run, modified for extended range capability. Someone replaced the original barrel with a shorter configuration, better suited for urban engagement distances. Warrant Officer Declan Frost looked up sharply from his own equipment preparations. 29 years old, with the lean build and precise movements of someone who had devoted his life to the mathematics of destruction, he served as the unit's ballistics expert and took personal offense at anyone who might challenge his technical supremacy. How could you possibly know the production run from visual inspection? The serial number prefix. Manufacturing standards changed in late 2018 after the Damascus incident revealed weaknesses in the original heat treatment process. Ren continued her inspection without looking up. The modification work is consistent with Field Armorer Certification Level 3, probably completed at Fort Campbell based on the specific threading pattern. Frost's expression cycled through surprise, skepticism, and something approaching alarm. That level of technical knowledge didn't come from civilian training programs. It came from years of intimate familiarity with weapon systems, under conditions where such knowledge meant the difference between mission success and body bags. Lucky guess. His voice lacked conviction. Crestwood had observed the exchange with growing irritation. The narrative he had constructed, the obvious incompetent who would provide entertainment value before being removed from the range, was developing uncomfortable complications. He stepped into Ren's personal space with the deliberate aggression of someone accustomed to using physical presence as a weapon. "Listen here, Princess." His voice dropped to a register that vibrated with barely contained hostility. Real operators earned their place on this range. Years of training, multiple deployments, blood and sacrifice that someone like you couldn't begin to understand. You're a mistake that's about to be corrected, so why don't you make this easy on everyone and request reassignment before you embarrass yourself further? Ren's weight shifted almost imperceptibly, settling into a stance that Thorne recognized with sudden crystalline clarity. For a fraction of a second, her body had prepared to respond to the physical threat with techniques that belonged to combat, not conversation. Then she caught herself, the tension dissolving so smoothly that anyone without Thorne's experience would have missed it entirely. "I'll stay for the qualification round, Sergeant. Then you can make your assessment based on actual performance rather than assumptions." The precision equipment calibration systems utilized by elite military marksmanship programs represented technology that most civilian shooters would never encounter. These advanced ballistic calculators integrated real-time atmospheric data, ammunition specifications, and terrain analysis to produce firing solutions accurate to the millimeter at distances that challenged the limits of human perception. The ruggedized tablets featured reinforced titanium construction designed to withstand battlefield conditions that would destroy standard electronics, while encrypted satellite connectivity enabled split-second trajectory calculations under the most demanding operational circumstances. Rangemaster Cole initiated the qualification sequence with the resignation of someone who had witnessed too many promising careers end in public humiliation. Standard progression, targets at 600, 800, and 1,000 meters. 3 rounds per distance, best aggregate score advances to the tactical phase. Lieutenant Foster approached the ammunition station with deliberate casualness, her movements calculated to attract minimal attention. A small adjustment to Ren's ammunition box, switching several cartridges for rounds with deliberately reduced powder charges, would create accuracy problems that could be attributed to shooter error rather than sabotage. The modifications were subtle enough to avoid detection, but significant enough to guarantee failure. "Good luck out there." Foster's smile contained all the warmth of a surgical instrument. "I'm sure you'll do your best." The first shooter took position at the 600-meter line, a British SAS captain whose multiple deployments had earned him a reputation for ice-cold precision under fire. His 3 rounds grouped within a 2-inch circle, drawing appreciative nods from observers who understood exactly how difficult that achievement was under Nevada's challenging atmospheric conditions. Wren watched each subsequent shooter with an intensity that seemed disproportionate to casual observation. Her eyes tracked not just shot placement, but wind indicators, heat shimmer patterns, the micro-adjustments each shooter made before pressing triggers. She was reading the range like a book, written in a language that most people didn't know existed. "Specialist Ashford, you're up." The words carried across the range like a death sentence. Phones that had briefly lowered during the legitimate competition rose again with renewed interest, their operators sensing the approaching entertainment of predicted failure. Wren approached the firing line with movement stripped of anything unnecessary. No nervous adjustments, no visible anxiety, just the economical precision of someone walking toward a task they had performed 10,000 times before. She settled into prone position behind the degraded training rifle, her body forming angles that seemed to defy standard shooting doctrine while somehow looking absolutely correct. 600 meters. Cole announced the distance for recording purposes. "Shooter ready?" "Ready." The shot broke clean, surprising several observers who had expected either hesitation or poor technique. Wren's position hadn't shifted at all. Her breathing had remained perfectly controlled, and the entire sequence from aim to trigger press to follow through had consumed less than 3 seconds. "Target hit, center mass." The spotter's voice carried genuine surprise. "Point of impact approximately 2 centimeters left of dead center." Crestwood snorted dismissively. "Beginner's luck. Anyone can make one shot." The second round followed within 4 seconds, the rhythm suggesting mechanical precision rather than human operation. The third completed the sequence before most observers had finished processing the first result. All 3 rounds within a 4-centimeter group. The spotter's voice had lost its surprise, replaced by something closer to confusion. Adjusting for the rifle's known deviation, that's effectively perfect accuracy. 800 meters brought increased difficulty and the beginning of visible confusion among the watching operators. At that distance, environmental factors amplified every imperfection in technique, equipment, and ammunition. The sabotaged rounds should have produced obvious accuracy degradation. Instead, Wren fired 3 shots that grouped tighter than most of the competition-grade rifles had achieved. Her adjustments between rounds were minimal, almost invisible, as if she had calculated the necessary corrections before taking position. "This is impossible." Frost had abandoned any pretense of casual observation, his tablet displaying calculations that contradicted the evidence of his own eyes. "That ammunition has a velocity variance of at least 50 feet per second. She shouldn't be able to compensate without multiple ranging shots." The 1,000-meter line brought the full weight of Nevada's hostile atmosphere into play. Heat shimmer created mirage effects that distorted target images. Crosswinds swirled unpredictably through the range valley. Even the premium competition ammunition suffered accuracy degradation at that distance under such challenging conditions. Wren's preparation differed from the previous distances. She spent 30 seconds observing the range, her eyes tracking patterns that no one else seemed to notice. A slight adjustment to her scope, 3 clicks that shouldn't have been sufficient correction based on Frost's calculations. Then absolute stillness as she entered the final phase of target engagement. The first shot struck the target's center mass with an impact that the scoring system registered as essentially perfect. The second followed 8 seconds later, landing within a centimeter of the first. The third completed a group that would have been remarkable with optimal equipment and pristine ammunition. All rounds center mass. The spotter's voice had developed an edge of something that sounded disturbingly like awe. Aggregate group size across all 3 distances measures under 7 centimeters. Silence descended on the range with the weight of a physical force. 150 of the world's most elite operators stood frozen, their assumptions about capability and qualification undergoing violent revision. Crestwood found his voice first, though it lacked its earlier confidence. "Equipment check. Something's wrong with the scoring system. There's no way she achieved those results with that rifle and that ammunition." Cole nodded slowly, his own certainty shaken but his professional obligations unchanged. Full inspection protocol, all weapons, ammunition, and electronic systems. The examination that followed revealed exactly what everyone already knew but didn't want to accept. The rifle's scope had the predicted 2mm deviation, The ammunition showed the sabotage that Foster had implemented, powder charges inconsistent enough to create significant accuracy variations. The scoring system was functioning within normal parameters. Results confirmed. Cole's voice carried the particular flatness of someone announcing news they didn't want to deliver. Specialist Ashford has achieved the highest qualification scores of the exercise using equipment that should have made such accuracy physically impossible. The advanced military education and legal consultation services required for classified operations demanded specialized expertise that civilian institutions couldn't provide. Professional development programs designed specifically for elite special operations personnel included comprehensive tactical instruction, advanced equipment familiarization, and classified protocol management. These exclusive educational frameworks prepared operatives for the complex challenges they would face during sensitive missions, where standard training would be completely insufficient for the sophisticated requirements of modern warfare. Colonel Whitmore had been monitoring the proceedings from the administrative building, his secure terminal displaying performance data that triggered automatic alerts when scores exceeded established parameters. The numbers simply didn't make sense. Civilian contractors, regardless of their claimed experience, didn't shoot at levels that embarrassed career special operations personnel using degraded equipment. Get me a full background on Specialist Ren Ashford. His voice carried the urgency of someone who had just realized they might have made a significant error. Everything. Service records, training certifications, security clearances, current employer, previous assignments. I want to know what she had for breakfast on her 10th birthday, if that information exists anywhere in any database. Communications Officer Talia Vance began the search with practiced efficiency, her fingers dancing across classified systems that linked military, intelligence, and law enforcement databases into a comprehensive investigative network. The initial results appeared normal enough. Contractor employment records with a Blackwater subsidiary, standard security clearances, nothing that would raise immediate red flags. Then she tried to access the detailed service records. The screen flashed a warning she had never encountered in 5 years of database work. Access denied. Authorization level insufficient. She tried an alternate pathway, using her elevated clearance to bypass the initial restriction. Query logged. Pentagon Security Operations notified. Sir, her voice carried the particular uncertainty of someone delivering news they didn't understand. I've hit something unusual. Her basic employment records check out, but anything deeper triggers Pentagon-level security protocols. I've never seen classification requirements this high for an individual query. Whitmore felt ice forming in his stomach. Security flags at that level meant one of two things. Either Specialist Ashford was involved in something criminally sensitive, or she was connected to programs that operated so far beyond normal military structure that even colonels weren't cleared to know they existed. Keep trying through official channels. Document every access attempt and every rejection. If someone asks questions later, I want proof we followed proper procedures. On the range, the atmosphere had shifted from mocking entertainment to uncomfortable uncertainty. Operators who had laughed at Ren's appearance now studied her with the particular attention that professionals gave to potential threats they had initially underestimated. Her shooting had demonstrated capability that demanded explanation, and none of the obvious answers fit the available evidence. Lucky shots. Crestwood's insistence had taken on a desperate quality. Perfect conditions, equipment that happened to perform above its rated capability, whatever. Real shooting happens under pressure, not controlled range conditions. The tactical phase will show what she's actually made of. The tactical phase represented the true test of operational capability. Moving targets, time pressure, environmental complications, and scenario-based challenges that couldn't be anticipated or rehearsed. If Ren's performance had been luck or fraud, the tactical phase would expose the deception with brutal efficiency. Dr. Sienna Marsh approached Ren during the equipment transition, her medical background driving curiosity that her military position required her to pursue. As the unit's combat medic, she was responsible for assessing the physical condition of all personnel, and something about the specialist's hands had caught her attention during the qualification round. Specialist, I noticed some scarring on your hands during the shooting sequence. Mind if I take a closer look? Standard medical documentation for the exercise record. Ren extended her hands without protest, allowing Marsh to examine the patterns that had triggered her professional interest. The scars told a story that didn't match contractor employment records. Blast patterns consistent with close proximity explosions. Surgical intervention marks that indicated treatment for significant trauma. Calluses in locations that matched extensive weapons handling under demanding conditions. These injuries, Marsh kept her voice carefully neutral. How did they occur? Training accidents. Wren's response came with the automatic smoothness of a well-rehearsed answer. Equipment malfunctions over several years. Marsh nodded slowly, knowing the explanation was inadequate but lacking the authority to press further. The scarring pattern she had observed belonged to combat veterans, not civilian contractors. Whatever Specialist Ashford's actual history contained, it extended far beyond the official records suggested. Master Chief Thorne had been conducting his own investigation through channels that didn't appear in any official communication log. 3 decades of service had built a network of relationships that crossed unit boundaries and security classifications, and he had used those connections to make discreet inquiries about the designation that had been nagging at his memory since watching Wren's shooting technique. The response arrived through a contact whose identity he would protect with his life. The message consisted of only 7 words, but they hit with the force of a physical blow. Stop asking questions. Walk away now. In Thorne's experience, that kind of warning came only when inquiries touched programs that operated outside normal military structure. The kind of programs that produced operators whose existence was officially denied while their capabilities shaped history in ways that would never appear in any record. He deleted the message and returned his attention to the range, where the tactical phase was beginning to take shape around a woman whose true nature remained hidden behind a carefully constructed facade of apparent vulnerability. Tactical Phase 1. Rangemaster Cole announced the scenario parameters to assembled participants. Simulated combat environment with multiple threat zones. Shooters will engage targets of opportunity while navigating a course designed to test decision-making under pressure. Time limits apply, and penalties will be assessed for civilian casualties represented by specifically marked targets. The course stretched across 300 meters of Nevada terrain that had been transformed into an urban combat simulation. Buildings constructed from the shipping containers created sightlines and cover positions. Pop-up targets appeared without warning from windows, doorways, and rooftop positions. Threat indicators required instant assessment and appropriate response. Crestwood attacked the course with the aggressive confidence of someone determined to re-establish dominance. His movements were professionally efficient, his target engagement rapid and accurate, his final time impressive enough to draw approving nods from observers who understood the difficulty of the challenge. 8 targets engaged, 8 hits, 0 civilian casualties. Cole recorded the results with professional satisfaction. Time, 2 minutes, 43 seconds, currently leading score. Other competitors followed with varying degrees of success. Some matched or exceeded Crestwood's speed, but suffered accuracy penalties. Others prioritized precision over tempo, and finished with clean shooting but slower times. The tactical phase separated recreational marksmen from genuine operators with merciless efficiency. Specialist Ashford. Wren approached the starting position with the same economical movement that had characterized her entire performance. Her eyes swept the course once, cataloging positions, angles, and potential threat locations with an intensity that suggested she was memorizing a battlefield rather than observing a training exercise. The timer started. What followed defied every expectation the observers had constructed. Wren moved through the course like water flowing through a complex system of channels, her path seemingly predetermined to maximize efficiency while minimizing exposure. Targets appeared and were engaged almost before they fully deployed, her rifle tracking from position to position with fluid precision that suggested the movements had been rehearsed 1,000 times. She cleared the first building complex in 47 seconds, a time that would have been impressive for the entire course. The second section fell even faster, as her pattern recognition seemed to anticipate target appearances before they occurred. By the time she reached the final engagement zone, experienced observers had stopped timing her performance and started simply watching in stunned silence. 8 targets engaged, 8 hits, 0 civilian penalties. Cole's voice had developed the particular flatness of someone announcing results they couldn't adequately explain. Time, 1 minute, 18 seconds. The number hung in the air like a physical accusation. Crestwood had completed the course in 2 minutes and 43 seconds, with the benefit of multiple previous training runs on similar layouts. Wren had nearly halved his time on her first attempt, using unfamiliar equipment with no apparent preparation. That's not possible. Frost had abandoned his pretense of objective analysis. The course layout isn't public information. She couldn't have pre-planned that route. The target timing is randomized. She couldn't have anticipated those engagements. Apparently she could. Thorne spoke quietly, but his words carried to everyone within earshot. The question is how and what it implies about her actual training background. Every clue is building towards something explosive, and these antagonists have no idea they're mocking someone whose true identity will shock them into silence. Drop a comment if you think you've figured out who Storm-Falcon really is, but don't spoil it for others. The reveal is coming. The break between tactical phases provided opportunity for the various factions forming around Wren's inexplicable performance to advance their agendas. Crestwood gathered his allies near the equipment station, his earlier mockery replaced by strategic planning. Something's wrong here. Either she's cheating somehow, or there's been a massive intelligence failure in letting her access this facility. He kept his voice low enough to avoid official attention, but carried enough force to communicate genuine concern. We need to find out which it is before the next phase. Lieutenant Hollister joined the group with carefully calculated timing. I may have resources that can help. My contacts in personnel administration can sometimes access records that aren't available through normal channels. What she didn't mention was that her resources consisted primarily of blackmail material and institutional manipulation rather than legitimate investigation. Technical Sergeant Mercer stood at the edge of the gathering, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. Every minute that passed increased his certainty that he was participating in something fundamentally wrong. The woman they were trying to destroy had been his student once, had demonstrated potential that he recognized as genuinely exceptional, had earned his respect before circumstances had forced them apart. But Hollister's photographs remained a weapon pointed at everything he had worked to protect. His wife's treatment, his pension, the modest security he had managed to build, despite decades of deployment-related absences. All of it balanced against the conscience that screamed at him to walk away from this conspiracy. Sergeant Mercer, Hollister's voice cut through his internal conflict. You mentioned earlier that you thought you recognized Specialist Ashford. Care to elaborate on that observation? The question was a trap, and Mercer recognized it immediately. Hollister wanted him committed to the conspiracy, wanted testimony she could use if things went wrong, wanted insurance against his potential betrayal. I was mistaken. The lie tasted like betrayal. She reminded me of someone I knew years ago, but the resemblance isn't as strong as I initially thought. Wren had observed the gathering from her position near the water station, her expression giving nothing away while her mind processed the implications of what she was witnessing. Hollister's involvement added a dimension she hadn't anticipated. The sabotage to her ammunition hadn't been random malice, but coordinated action, and Mercer's presence suggested the conspiracy extended to people who should have known better. She had hoped to complete this assignment without revealing her actual capabilities. The evaluation mission required assessment of facility security and training standards, not public demonstration of skills that were supposed to remain classified. But circumstance had forced adaptations, and now she needed to determine how much further the situation would escalate before intervention became necessary. Private First Class Emmett Locke approached with the tentative confidence of someone who had witnessed something significant and wanted to understand its meaning. 22 years old, the newest member of the training cohort, he had watched the morning's events with growing confusion about the disconnect between what everyone said about Wren and what her performance actually demonstrated. "Ma'am, can I ask you something?" Wren studied him for a moment, assessing threat potential and finding only genuine curiosity. "Go ahead." "The shooting you demonstrated, the tactical phase performance, I've never seen anything like it. Not from any of the instructors, not from the operators I've trained with. Where did you learn to do that?" It was the same question everyone wanted answered, but Locke's delivery contained none of the hostility or suspicion that characterized similar inquiries from others. He genuinely wanted to understand, and something in that sincerity deserved a response that approached honesty. "Practice." Wren allowed a small smile to touch her features. Thousands of hours of practice in environments that demanded perfection as the price of survival. The others think you're cheating somehow, that nobody could really shoot like that without some kind of advantage they don't understand. What do you think, Private? Locke considered the question with seriousness that exceeded his years. I think you're dangerous in ways that none of them have figured out yet. And I think whatever you're really doing here is a lot more complicated than taking a marksmanship qualification. The observation demonstrated perception that Wren had not expected from someone with Locke's limited experience. She filed the assessment away for future reference, adding him to the short list of personnel whose instincts might prove valuable as circumstances developed. You should be careful, Private. People who see too clearly sometimes find themselves in uncomfortable positions. Ma'am, I've been uncomfortable since I got here. Everyone assumes I'm too green to handle real operations, but assumptions are just opinions dressed up as facts. I figure you probably understand that better than most. Colonel Whitmore had been receiving updates from his intelligence staff with increasing frequency and decreasing satisfaction. Every query about Wren's background generated more security flags without providing any actual information. The pattern suggested either extremely sophisticated identity protection or connection to programs that operated outside normal military structure. Sir, I've escalated the inquiry to Special Operations Command, Vance reported from her monitoring station. They're requesting direct communication through secure channels. Priority classification. The call connected Whitmore with Colonel Harrison Mitchell, whose position in the Special Operations hierarchy gave him access to information streams that remained invisible to conventional military leadership. Mitchell's voice carried the particular caution of someone about to deliver news that would reshape understanding. Colonel Whitmore, I understand you have questions about one of your current personnel assignments. A specialist Wren Ashford, call sign Storm-Falcon. Yes, sir. Her performance has raised concerns about the accuracy of her background documentation. Either she's significantly more qualified than her records indicate, or we have a security breach that needs immediate attention. Mitchell was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had dropped to a register that communicated classification levels that couldn't be directly stated over even secure communications. Colonel, I'm going to give you guidance that will sound unusual, but I need you to accept it without demanding explanations that I'm not authorized to provide. Specialist Ashford is exactly where she's supposed to be, doing exactly what she's supposed to be doing. Any attempt to remove her from the exercise or investigate her background further will generate complications that neither of us wants to navigate. Sir, with respect, I have a responsibility for facility security and personnel safety. If there's something about this woman that I should know, what you should know is that her presence has been authorized at levels significantly above your clearance or mine. The evaluation she's conducting isn't about her qualifications. It's about your facility's response to unexpected capabilities and unconventional personnel. I'd suggest your staff consider that context when they decide how to proceed with their various conspiracies. The call ended before Whitmore could formulate a response. He sat in his office for several minutes, processing implications that recontextualized everything he had witnessed since Wren's arrival. The shooting performance that seemed impossible suddenly made sense as capability rather than luck. The security flags that blocked his investigation became protective barriers rather than suspicious anomalies. He was being evaluated, and he had allowed his facility to fail. The tactical phase continued with scenarios of increasing complexity: urban warfare simulations, hostage rescue situations, long-range engagements under time pressure, each challenge designed to test different aspects of operational capability. And with each successive scenario, Wren's performance continued to exceed parameters that the exercise designers had considered maximum human capability. Simulated sniper engagement, Cole announced the final evaluation segment. Target at 1,200 meters, partial concealment, 90-second engagement window. Shooters will be scored on time to first impact and shot placement accuracy. The distance pushed the effective range of standard military rifles to their absolute limits. At 1,200 meters, bullet drop measured in multiple meters rather than centimeters. Wind drift could push rounds entirely off target. Heat shimmer created optical illusions that fooled even experienced shooters. The 90-second window provided barely enough time for proper target identification and engagement solution calculation. Crestwood took his position with grim determination. His reputation depended on performance that demonstrated why he had earned the respect of his peers over years of service. The 1,200-meter shot was difficult but not impossible, and he had made similar engagements during actual combat operations. His first round struck the target 53 seconds into the window, landing in the outer scoring ring rather than center mass, but still counting as a hit. The achievement represented excellent marksmanship under demanding conditions, and his expression carried justified satisfaction as he cleared the firing position. Ren approached the line with the same economical precision that had characterized her entire performance. She spent 7 seconds observing the range, her eyes tracking patterns that no one else seemed to notice. Then she settled behind her rifle with the particular stillness of a predator whose prey had wandered within striking distance. The shot broke at 11 seconds, not 11 minutes or 11 attempts, but 11 seconds from taking position to pressing trigger. The distance was 1,200 meters. The target was partially concealed. The environmental conditions were actively hostile to precision shooting. Center mass impact. Cole's voice had developed a quality that suggested he was no longer entirely certain about the reality he was describing. Time to engagement, 11 seconds. Shot placement, essential perfect center. The achievement wasn't just impressive. It was impossible by any reasonable assessment of human capability. Target identification, range estimation, environmental factor calculation, and shot execution normally required a minimum of 45 seconds even for highly experienced snipers. Ren had compressed that timeline to 11 seconds, while still achieving accuracy that exceeded the exercise's design parameters. Thorne had stopped pretending that he wasn't watching Ren with the intensity of a man who had just discovered something terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. 3 decades of service had taught him to recognize exceptional capability when he encountered it, and what he was witnessing belonged to a category he had previously considered theoretical rather than actual. "Master Chief," Corporal Judson Waverly approached with phone still recording, his expression mixing excitement with uncertainty. "You've been around longer than anyone here. Have you ever seen shooting like this?" "Once." Thorne's response came slowly, as if the memory was being excavated from deep storage. "Years ago, during a joint exercise with units that don't officially exist. The shooter was identified only by a designation that sounded like something out of mythology. The performance I witnessed that day stayed with me because it represented capability I didn't think humans could actually achieve. And this, what she's doing today, this is better. Whatever that shooter represented, Specialist Ashford is operating at a level beyond it. Which means either I'm watching the most sophisticated deception in military history, or I'm watching someone whose true nature has been very carefully hidden until today." The professional security consultation services required for high-value executive protection incorporated assessment protocols originally developed for classified military operations. Personal protection specialists trained in special operations methodologies provided comprehensive threat evaluation, personnel vetting, and crisis response planning that ensured complete protection in environments where standard security measures proved inadequate for sophisticated modern threats. The final briefing for the joint exercise assembled all participants in the main Tactical Operations Center. Large displays showed satellite imagery of the exercise area, a mock hostile territory constructed in Nevada's expansive desert training grounds. The scenario involved infiltration, reconnaissance, and potential engagement with simulated enemy forces defending a high-value target complex. Exercise parameters. Captain Drake Ellington outlined the mission with professional efficiency. His position as squad leader for Alpha Team gave him responsibility for personnel assignments that would determine life or death during actual operations. 2 teams, parallel infiltration routes, converging on the objective complex. Designated marksmen will provide overwatch and target elimination as required. He paused, consulting his roster with visible reluctance. Alpha Team's designated marksman will be Specialist Ashford. This assignment follows standard rotation protocols and represents official command decision rather than squad leadership preference. Crestwood's jaw tightened at the announcement. The assignment placed Ren in direct operational responsibility for his squad's survival during the exercise. Whatever doubts he harbored about her capabilities, the tactical reality required him to trust her skills or request reassignment that would damage his professional reputation. "Sir," Hollister stepped forward with the particular confidence of someone about to play a carefully prepared card. Given concerns about Specialist Ashford's background verification, perhaps she should be assigned an observation role rather than primary shooter responsibility. "Lieutenant, those concerns have been addressed through command channels." Colonel Whitmore's voice carried new weight, informed by his conversation with Mitchell. "Specialist Ashford's assignment stands. Any further discussion on this matter will be noted in official records." The warning was clear enough that even Hollister recognized the shift in command perspective. Whatever game she had been playing, the rules had just changed in ways that threatened her carefully constructed plans. Mercer watched the exchange with growing conflict. Every sign indicated that the conspiracy to discredit Wren was collapsing under the weight of her undeniable performance. The sensible course would be to distance himself from Hollister's schemes before the inevitable accountability arrived. But the photographs remained a threat that couldn't be dismissed, and his family's security still hung in the balance. Wren observed the room with the particular attention of someone cataloging potential allies and threats. The exercise would provide opportunities to assess facility security from inside operational scenarios, but it also created vulnerabilities that her opponents might exploit. Whatever happened during the infiltration phase, she needed to maintain cover while still completing her actual mission objectives. Equipment check and departure in 90 minutes. Ellington concluded the briefing. All personnel should finalize preparations and report to staging areas at 1400 hours. The staging area buzzed with activity as operators prepared for deployment. Equipment was checked and rechecked, communication systems were tested, medical supplies were inventoried and distributed. The particular energy that preceded operational deployment, even simulated operations, charged the atmosphere with anticipation that bordered on electrical. Thorne found Wren near the ammunition resupply station, her movements efficient as she selected rounds for her assigned rifle. The training ammunition was designed to simulate actual combat loads without the lethal consequences, but her selection process suggested someone accustomed to choosing between options that could determine mission success or failure. Specialist Ashford. He kept his voice low enough to avoid general attention. A moment of your time? Master Chief? Wren didn't pause her preparations, but her attention shifted to include him in her awareness. I've been in special operations for 30 years. I've seen capabilities that would seem impossible to civilians and exceptional even by military standards. What you've demonstrated today exceeds any of that by a significant margin. And I'm trying to understand what I'm actually witnessing. The shooting skills, the tactical performance, the equipment knowledge, none of it matches any training program I've ever encountered. Either you've invented entirely new methodologies, or you've been trained by organizations that don't appear in any database I can access. Wren was silent for a long moment, her hands continuing their work while her mind processed the implications of Thorne's observation. He was closer to the truth than anyone else on the range, and his recognition posed both opportunity and risk. Master Chief, some questions are better left unasked. Not because the answers are dangerous, but because knowledge creates obligations that can complicate simple situations. This situation stopped being simple the moment you made an 11-second shot at 1,200 meters. Whatever you are actually doing here, it's already more complicated than most people in this facility can comprehend. Then perhaps the wisest course is patience. Sometimes understanding arrives when circumstances demand revelation rather than investigation. The answer was neither confirmation nor denial, but it communicated something important. Wren knew exactly what she was, knew that Thorne was approaching that knowledge, and was neither threatened by his curiosity nor willing to satisfy it prematurely. I'll take that under advisement. Thorne nodded slowly. For what it's worth, if things get complicated during this exercise, I've got your back. Whatever your actual story is, your capabilities have earned that much from me. Thank you, Master Chief. That recognition means more than you might realize. The helicopters lifted off at 1400 hours exactly, carrying 2 squads of elite operators into a desert landscape that would test every skill they possessed. The exercise area stretched across 40 square kilometers of terrain that had been transformed into simulated hostile territory, complete with defended positions, surveillance systems, and opposition forces whose job was to make successful infiltration as difficult as possible. Wren watched the ground scroll past through the helicopter's open door, her mind processing terrain features with the particular attention of someone who had conducted similar operations in environments where failure meant actual death rather than exercise failure. The Nevada landscape bore little resemblance to the mountains of Afghanistan or the urban destruction of Syria, but the fundamental principles of infiltration and engagement remained constant regardless of geography. 30 seconds to insertion, the pilot's voice crackled through internal communications. LZ is cold, no observed activity in the immediate area. The squad deployed with professional efficiency, each operator taking their assigned position in the formation that would carry them through the initial approach phase. Crestwood led from the front, despite his reservations about the team composition, his commitment to mission success overriding personal conflicts that could be addressed after the exercise concluded. Wren took her position at the formation's rear, her assigned role as designated marksman requiring her to maintain overwatch while the main element advanced. The terrain provided limited concealment, but years of training had taught her to use even minimal cover to maximum effect. Her movements across open ground were calculated to minimize exposure while maintaining awareness of threat positions that might develop. The first contact came 2 hours into the exercise. Opposition forces had established an observation post that controlled approach routes to the primary objective. Standard doctrine required either neutralization or circumvention, and the squad halted while leadership assessed options. Overwatch position established, Wren reported through her communications set. I have visual on the observation, mate. 2 personnel, elevated position, limited cover from this angle, range and engagement solution. Ellington's voice carried the particular tension of someone making decisions that would determine exercise outcome. 640 meters. Wind from east at approximately 8 knots. I have the shot whenever you're ready to proceed. The engagement that followed demonstrated the kind of precision that had characterized Wren's entire performance. 2 simulated targets, 2 shots, 2 impacts that the exercise monitoring system registered as neutralization. The observation post was cleared in under 4 seconds, and the squad resumed movement without breaking stride. Specialist Ashford, Ellington's voice carried newfound respect. Confirmed kills on both targets. Outstanding shooting. The advancement toward the objective continued through terrain that grew progressively more challenging. Opposition forces had established defensive positions that required careful navigation, and the squad's progress slowed as they approached the simulated enemy stronghold. Intel had suggested moderate resistance, but the actual defensive layout exceeded initial assessments. This doesn't match the briefing parameters. Frost had been tracking opposition force movements through his tactical tablet. We're seeing at least twice the expected defensive concentration. Either Intel was wrong, or someone adjusted the exercise difficulty without notification. Hollister's expression flickered with something that might have been satisfaction before returning to professional neutrality. The exercise modifications she had arranged through her administrative contacts were designed to create circumstances that would expose Wren's limitations. If the squad encountered overwhelming opposition, even exceptional shooting skills wouldn't prevent failure that could be blamed on the designated marksman's inexperience. Continue mission. Ellington made the command decision despite growing concerns about tactical situation. Adjust approach vector to minimize exposure. Overwatch, maintain position, and provide cover as needed. The approach to the objective complex brought the squad into a narrow valley that offered limited defensive options. High ground on both sides created potential firing positions for opposition forces, and the terrain funneled movement into predictable patterns that made ambush almost inevitable. Wren had been tracking the tactical situation with growing concern. The valley approach violated basic infiltration doctrine, creating exposure that competent opposition would exploit. Either the exercise designers had made a significant error, or someone had deliberately modified the scenario to create maximum vulnerability. Command, this is Overwatch. She keyed her communications set. Current approach vector creates unacceptable exposure. Recommend alternate route through secondary terrain features to avoid potential ambush positioning. Negative Overwatch. Ellington's response carried the particular frustration of someone constrained by orders he didn't fully support. Mission parameters require this approach vector. Continue as briefed. The squad entered the valley at 15:37 hours. For approximately 90 seconds, nothing happened. Then the world exploded into chaos. Opposition forces opened fire from elevated positions on both valley walls. The simulated rounds weren't lethal, but they were designed to register impacts that would eliminate participants from the exercise. Within the first 30 seconds, 3 squad members had been tagged as casualties, their status indicators switching from active to eliminated. Ambush left and right! Crestwood's voice cut through the confusion. Take cover and return fire! But cover was limited in the valley floor, and the opposition's elevated positions provided clear fields of fire that made defensive action increasingly desperate. More squad members fell to simulated fire as the ambush continued with mechanical efficiency. Private Locke caught a simulated round in the shoulder that registered as a non-fatal wound, dropping him behind minimal cover that offered temporary protection. The medic moved to provide simulated treatment, but the tactical situation continued to deteriorate around them. "Overwatch, we need suppression on those elevated positions." Ellington's voice carried desperation that exceeded exercise parameters. The ambush was too effective, the casualties mounting too quickly. Something was wrong beyond normal training scenarios. Ren had already been analyzing the opposition positions, identifying target priorities and engagement sequences that could shift the tactical balance. The distance to the primary threat positions exceeded 800 meters across difficult terrain with challenging wind conditions. Standard doctrine would require multiple shots and significant time to neutralize the threats. She didn't have time for standard doctrine. The next 10 minutes will change everything. Before we continue, hit that notification bell because you're about to witness one of the most satisfying moments of justice ever captured. Stay right here because the impossible is about to become reality. The first shot dropped an opposition shooter at 820 meters before anyone had registered her weapon discharge. The second followed within 3 seconds, neutralizing another position on the opposite valley wall. The third and fourth came in rapid succession, removing threat positions that had been pouring simulated fire into the trapped squad. Targets down, multiple positions. Ren's voice remained absolutely calm despite the chaos below, continuing engagement. Her rifle tracked from position to position with fluid precision that defied standard human capability. Each shot was a mathematical equation solved in real time, accounting for distance, wind, elevation, and target movement with instantaneous accuracy. Opposition forces that had expected easy victory found themselves being systematically dismantled by a single shooter operating at range that should have made such precision impossible. "What is she doing?" Frost watched his tactical display with growing disbelief. Those engagement distances, she shouldn't be able to hit anything at that range under these conditions. But hit she did. Shot after shot found targets that were supposed to be safe beyond effective rifle range. The ambush that had threatened to eliminate the entire squad was transformed into a rout as opposition forces discovered that their elevated positions offered no protection against someone whose skills exceeded any reasonable expectation. Within 4 minutes, the valley had fallen silent. 12 opposition shooters had been eliminated from the exercise, their positions marked on tactical displays as neutralized threats. The ambush that should have destroyed the squad had been completely reversed by a single designated marksman operating at the absolute limits of military small arms capability. Status report. Ellington's voice carried the particular uncertainty of someone whose understanding of reality had just been fundamentally challenged. All units, status report. The exercise monitors had been tracking events with professional attention that was rapidly transitioning to something closer to shock. The performance they were witnessing didn't match any established parameters for human marksmanship capability. Either their monitoring systems had malfunctioned catastrophically, or they were watching something that shouldn't be possible. Exercise pause. Colonel Whitmore's voice cut through all communications channels. All units hold position. Command is assessing tactical situation. The pause provided opportunity for the ambushed squad to reorganize and process what had just happened. Crestwood moved through his remaining personnel, checking status and confirming that the wounded had been stabilized according to exercise protocols. His expression cycled through emotions that ranged from relief to confusion to something approaching awe. "That shooting." He spoke to no one in particular. "That's not possible. Nobody shoots like that. Nobody." Locke, still nursing his simulated wound, managed a weak laugh. "Told you she was dangerous, Sergeant. Maybe next time you'll listen when someone is trying to give you good information." The accusation was mild, but it landed with force that exceeded its volume. Crestwood had spent the entire exercise preparation period dismissing Ren as a liability, and her performance had just saved his squad from simulated elimination. The contrast between his assumptions and reality couldn't be ignored or explained away. But the exercise wasn't finished, and circumstances were about to escalate in ways that no one had anticipated. Because the ambush modification hadn't been the only change Hollister had arranged through her administrative contacts. Somewhere in the exercise control systems, additional complications were being prepared that would transform a training scenario into something far more dangerous. And in the distance, barely visible against the afternoon sky, a figure was taking position at a range that exceeded any standard military engagement parameters. A range that would require capabilities beyond anything the exercise had been designed to test. 2,400 meters. The impossible distance that would determine whether Storm-Falcon was merely exceptional or something else entirely. The tactical display showed something that made Warrant Officer Frost's blood run cold. A heat signature had materialized at extreme range, positioned on elevated terrain that overlooked the valley where Alpha Squad remained pinned, despite Wren's devastating counter-ambush performance. Contact. His voice cracked slightly. Elevated position, bearing 027, range is showing 2,400 meters. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. 2,400 meters exceeded the effective range of any standard military rifle system by a significant margin. At that distance, bullets traveled for nearly 4 seconds, dropping dozens of meters while wind pushed them unpredictably across the engagement corridor. Even the most advanced sniper systems struggled to achieve consistent accuracy at such extreme range. That can't be right. Crestwood checked his own rangefinder, hoping for equipment malfunction. The device confirmed Frost's reading with merciless precision. 2,400 meters. Who authorized opposition forces at that distance? That's not a training scenario, that's an execution setup. The answer came in the form of simulated fire that struck the rock formation where Captain Ellington had established command position. The impact registered on exercise monitoring systems as a near miss, close enough to demonstrate capability without eliminating the squad leader. They're not playing by exercise rules. Ellington's voice carried the particular tension of someone who had just realized the game had fundamentally changed. That shooter is operating outside standard parameters. Either Control has lost track of their opposition forces, or someone modified this scenario without authorization. Hollister's expression flickered with something that might have been concern. The modifications she had arranged were supposed to create difficult circumstances, not genuinely dangerous ones. Opposition forces at 2,400 meters, with apparent authorization to engage freely, represented escalation beyond her intended parameters. Command, this is Alpha 6. Ellington keyed his communication set with urgent precision. We have opposition contact at extreme range, approximately 2,400 meters. Requesting confirmation of exercise parameters and rules of engagement. Static answered his transmission. The communications blackout that was supposed to simulate contested electromagnetic environments had become genuinely problematic. Whatever was happening at the control center, Alpha Squad was effectively isolated, with a threat they couldn't reach and couldn't escape. We need to move. Crestwood assessed their tactical position with growing desperation. That shooter has clear fields of fire across this entire valley. If we stay here, we're targets. Move where? Frost's voice carried the edge of someone whose mathematical mind had already calculated the hopeless odds. 2,400 meters means he can engage us anywhere in this terrain. There's no cover that provides protection at that range. Private Locke, still nursing his simulated wound behind minimal cover, voiced what everyone was thinking. What about our designated marksman? Specialist Ashford just dropped 12 targets at 800+ meters. Maybe she can reach that shooter. The suggestion drew immediate skepticism from multiple directions. Crestwood shook his head with the particular frustration of someone confronting impossible mathematics. 2,400 meters isn't 800 meters. The physics don't scale linearly. Bullet drop at that range measures in dozens of meters. Wind drift becomes essentially unpredictable. Even with perfect equipment and optimal conditions, that shot is borderline impossible. Borderline impossible is still possible, Locke pressed despite his subordinate position. And right now, impossible is the only option we have. Wren had been monitoring the tactical situation from her overwatch position, her mind processing variables that most shooters wouldn't even recognize as relevant. The opposing sniper at 2,400 meters represented a challenge that exceeded standard military parameters, but standard parameters had never defined her operational capabilities. She keyed her communications set. Alpha 6, this is Overwatch. I can reach that shooter, but I need 90 seconds of distraction to establish a firing position with appropriate angle. Specialist, that range is beyond any rifle system we're carrying. Ellington's response carried doubt that bordered on dismissal. I appreciate the confidence, but we need realistic solutions. Sir, with respect, my solution is realistic. I've made shots at this range before. Not often, and not under easy conditions, but the capability exists. What I need is time to position and calculate. Can you provide that distraction? The request hung in the air while leadership processed implications that challenged their understanding of human capability. Master Chief Thorne, who had been observing the tactical situation with growing concern, made the decision that military hierarchy had been too slow to reach. Do it, Specialist. Whatever you need, we'll provide. Alpha Squad, prepare for diversionary movement on my mark. Wren was already moving before the authorization finished transmitting. Her path across the rocky terrain followed angles that minimized exposure while maximizing speed, each footfall placed with precision that came from years of navigating hostile environments where a single misstep meant death. The elevated rock formation she had identified offered the combination of stability and angle that a 2,400-meter shot demanded. The climb was treacherous, loose stones threatening to betray her position with every movement, but her hands found purchase with the certainty of someone who had scaled worse surfaces under actual enemy fire. 70 meters of vertical ascent, 43 seconds of exposure. Every moment stretched toward infinity as she climbed toward a firing position that would either validate her capabilities or demonstrate their limits. The rock face caught her tactical shirt as she pulled herself over a jagged outcropping. The fabric, already stressed from the day's exertions, surrendered to physics with a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the desert silence. The tear ran from her right shoulder blade down across her upper back, exposing skin that told a story no official record contained. Below, Thorn had positioned himself with binoculars trained on Wren's climbing route, providing security overwatch for her movement. When the shirt tore, when the exposed skin came into focus through his magnified optics, his hands began trembling with recognition that hit like a physical blow. The tattoo spread across her upper back and shoulder, with the intricate precision of military inkwork executed by artists who understood that such markings were sacred text, written on living flesh. A stylized falcon emerged from storm clouds, rendered in blacks and grays that seemed to move with her breathing. Lightning bolts radiated from the wings in patterns that carried meaning beyond mere decoration. Below the central image, text in military block letters spelled out designations that made Thorn's heart stop. Phantom 7. Coordinates followed the designation, numbers that Thorn recognized from classified briefings about an operation in Syria that had officially never happened. 362048 degrees north, 37.1343 degrees east. The location where 7 operators had died and 1 had supposedly joined them, except the records had been wrong. 7 small stars circled the emblem like a constellation of grief. 7 teammates. 7 ghosts that she carried with her across every battlefield. Holy mother of... Thorn's whisper carried to no one, lost in the desert wind that was already complicating the impossible shot Wren was preparing to attempt. She settled into prone position on the rock formation, her body forming angles that seemed to defy standard shooting doctrine while somehow looking absolutely correct. The rifle extended before her like an instrument of mathematical precision, its scope gathering light that would travel 2,400 meters before reaching the target her eyes had already acquired. The sandstorm that had been building on the horizon chose that moment to announce its presence. Wind velocity increased from manageable to challenging, carrying particles that would affect bullet trajectory in ways that standard ballistic calculations couldn't adequately predict. Overwatch, status? Ellington's voice carried desperation that exceeded exercise parameters. The opposing sniper had continued engaging, each shot driving the squad deeper into positions that offered diminishing protection. Calculating. Wren's response came with the absolute calm of someone who had entered a mental space where external chaos became irrelevant noise. 2,400 meters, sandstorm coefficient approximately 1.3, mirage effect from temperature differential between valley floor and elevated positions, Coriolis adjustment for latitude and bullet flight time. Frost listened to her transmission with growing disbelief. The variables she was citing represented advanced ballistic considerations that most military snipers never encountered, calculations that required either sophisticated computer assistance or capabilities that exceeded standard human performance. Bullet drop at terminal velocity approximately 47 meters. Wren continued her verbal calculation, each number representing a factor that would determine whether her shot found its target or disappeared harmlessly into the Nevada desert. Wind drift compensation for variable gusts, approximately 12 meters lateral adjustment. Scope elevation adjustment, 73 clicks. Windage adjustment, 41 clicks right. Her fingers moved across the scope turrets with mechanical precision, each click representing a fraction of angular measurement that would compound across 2,400 meters of hostile atmosphere. The adjustments she was making exceeded the design parameters of standard military optics, pushing equipment to limits its manufacturers had never anticipated. Alpha 6, on my shot, You'll have approximately 4 seconds before impact confirmation. Use that time to begin extraction movement towards secondary rally point. Specialist, are you certain about this? Ellington's question carried the weight of command responsibility, the understanding that he was about to stake his squad's survival on capabilities he couldn't verify. No, sir. Certainty doesn't exist at this range under these conditions, but probability favors the prepared, and I've been preparing for shots like this my entire career. The Advanced Leadership Development programs, now incorporating decision-making frameworks, originally designed for special operations commanders facing life-or-death situations, provided comprehensive instruction in crisis management. These executive training courses delivered intensive education in ethical leadership under extreme pressure and strategic thinking methodologies developed through decades of classified military operational experience worldwide. Wren's breathing slowed to a rhythm that medical observers would have found concerning. Her heart rate dropped below 50 beats per minute, then below 45, approaching the threshold where conscious thought began surrendering to trained instinct. The rifle became an extension of her body, its barrel aligned with a target that appeared no larger than a grain of sand through magnification, that pushed optical physics to their limits. The sandstorm intensified, wind gusted unpredictably across the engagement corridor. Temperature differentials created mirage effects that made the distant target shimmer like a fever dream. Every environmental factor conspired to make the shot impossible. She waited. The wind shifted. A momentary lull in the chaos, a window measured in fractions of seconds that would close before conscious thought could recognize its existence. But Wren wasn't operating on conscious thought. She was operating on training that had been burned into her nervous system through thousands of repetitions, under conditions that made this moment seem almost manageable. The trigger broke with the particular cleanness that marked the difference between adequate marksmanship and transcendent precision. The rifle's report echoed across the valley, drawing every eye toward the rock formation where a woman with torn tactical clothing had just attempted something that physics suggested shouldn't work. 4 seconds of flight time. 4 seconds that stretched toward eternity as the round crossed 2,400 meters of hostile atmosphere. 4 seconds during which every calculation, every adjustment, every factor that Wren had processed would be validated or proven insufficient. The opposing sniper's position erupted with the distinctive signature of a direct hit. Exercise monitoring systems registered the impact with mechanical indifference to the impossibility they were documenting. Target neutralized. Range, 2,417 meters. Shot placement, center mass. Silence descended on the valley with the weight of revelation. 150 elite operators, scattered across positions throughout the exercise area, processed information that challenged their understanding of human capability. The shot that had just been made didn't belong in training scenarios or competition records. It belonged in legend. Target down! Thorne's voice carried across the communications net with something approaching religious awe. 2,400 meters, center mass, confirmed kill. Crestwood stood frozen behind his cover position, the rifle in his hands suddenly feeling like a child's toy compared to the instrument of precision that had just saved his squad. The woman he had mocked as a fashion model, dismissed as a liability, publicly humiliated for the entertainment of his peers, had just executed a shot that exceeded anything he would achieve in his entire military career. That's not possible. The words emerged as whisper, lacking conviction. That shot is not possible. Sergeant, Locke's voice carried gentle correction that somehow stung worse than accusation. I think we need to reconsider what's possible. The exercise control center had erupted into controlled chaos as personnel processed data that contradicted every established parameter for human marksmanship performance. Colonel Whitmore stood before the primary display, watching playback of monitoring footage that showed trajectory analysis and impact confirmation for a shot that should have been impossible. Get me Pentagon operations. His voice carried the particular flatness of someone whose assumptions had just been catastrophically revised. Priority communication. This situation has exceeded our authorization level. Communications Officer Vance initiated the connection, with hands that trembled slightly. The security alerts that had been triggered by earlier database queries had prepared her for unusual circumstances, but nothing in her training had prepared her for what she was witnessing. Colonel Whitmore, this is Admiral Hayes Morrison. The voice that emerged from secure communications carried the weight of stars and decades of command authority. I understand you have a situation developing at your facility. Admiral, One of our exercise participants has just demonstrated capabilities that exceed any documented human performance standards. A shot at 2,400 meters under adverse conditions with accuracy that our monitoring systems can barely credit. I need guidance on how to proceed. The participant in question, call sign Storm-Falcon. Yes, sir. Specialist Ren Ashford. Morrison's pause communicated volumes that words couldn't adequately express. When he spoke again, his voice carried the particular caution of someone handling information that could reshape understanding. Colonel, I'm en route to your facility by helicopter. ETA approximately 40 minutes. Until my arrival, you will take no action regarding Specialist Ashford beyond ensuring her safety and the completion of current exercise parameters. Is that understood? Sir, with respect, I need to understand what we're dealing with. Her capabilities suggest training that doesn't appear in any program I'm aware of, and security protocols demand. Colonel, Morrison's interruption carried absolute authority. What you're dealing with is classified above your clearance level and mine. What I can tell you is that Specialist Ashford is exactly who she's supposed to be, doing exactly what she's supposed to do. The evaluation she's been conducting isn't about her qualifications. It's about how your facility responds to capabilities that challenge conventional assumptions. The call ended, leaving Whitmore standing before displays that showed exercise status and a single highlighted designation that had suddenly become the most significant data point in the entire operation. Storm-Falcon. Phantom 7. The call signs of someone whose official record listed them as killed in action 3 years ago, but whose living presence had just rewritten the rules of what military snipers could achieve. On the rock formation, Ren had broken down her firing position and begun the descent that would return her to Alpha Squad's location. The torn tactical shirt flapped in the wind, exposing the tattoo that Thorne had recognized, and that others would soon see. The revelation she had hoped to avoid was now inevitable, but the squad was alive because of her impossible shot, and that mattered more than operational security. The extraction proceeded with efficiency that belied the chaos of the previous hour. Alpha Squad consolidated at secondary rally points, while exercise control confirmed that all opposition forces had been neutralized or withdrawn. The scenario that had threatened to eliminate the entire unit had instead become a demonstration of capability that would be studied and debated for years. Specialist Ashford, Ellington's voice carried respect that hadn't existed in his earlier communications. Outstanding shooting. I've never seen anything like what you just demonstrated. Thank you, sir. Ren's response remained measured despite the adrenaline still coursing through her system. The squad's survival was the priority, everything else is secondary. Crestwood approached with the particular heaviness of someone carrying the weight of accumulated shame. His earlier mockery, his public humiliation, his dismissive assessment of her capabilities, all of it now hung around his neck like chains forged from his own arrogance. Specialist? The word emerged with difficulty, as if his throat had forgotten how to form sounds that didn't carry contempt. I owe you more than I can express. You saved my squad. You saved me. After everything I said, everything I did, you still... Sergeant Crestwood. Ren met his eyes with the gray-green steadiness that had characterized her responses throughout the ordeal. I didn't save your squad because you deserved it. I saved them because that's what designated marksmen do. Capability doesn't require approval, and duty doesn't wait for apologies. The words hit harder than any physical blow could have. Crestwood had built his identity around being the best, the most capable, the most deserving of respect. Ren had just demonstrated that true capability didn't advertise itself, didn't demand recognition, didn't require the validation he had spent years accumulating. You're right, his voice cracked slightly. You're absolutely right. And when this is over, if you're willing, I'd like to learn from you. Whatever training produced those skills, whatever program created that capability, I want to understand it. The training that produced these skills cost 7 lives, Sergeant. People I loved, people who trusted me, people who died because someone in a position of authority decided that intelligence was worth trading for political advantage. Ren's voice remained steady, but something in her eyes carried grief that exceeded the present moment. Be careful what you wish for. Excellence at this level comes with prices that most people can't afford to pay. The helicopter carrying Admiral Morrison touched down at the exercise facility's primary landing zone at 17:23 hours. The two-star admiral descended with the particular bearing of someone accustomed to authority that went unquestioned, flanked by aides whose expressions communicated the significance of the moment. Exercise participants had been assembled in the main tactical operations center, their various states of exhaustion and confusion creating an atmosphere of anticipation that bordered on electrical. Rumors had spread with the speed of modern communication, fragmentary accounts of impossible shooting and classified designations that no one quite understood. Wren stood near the rear of the assembled group, her torn tactical shirt replaced with standard uniform blouse that covered but couldn't erase the revelation that had already occurred. Thorne had positioned himself nearby, his protective instinct asserting itself despite the lack of obvious threat. Attention on deck. The command brought every military member to immediate response, back straightening as Morrison entered the operations center with measured stride. His eyes swept the room, cataloging faces and reactions with the assessment skills developed through decades of command. When his gaze found Wren, something shifted in his expression. Recognition, respect, and something deeper that suggested personal history beyond professional obligation. At ease, Morrison's voice carried to every corner of the space. Most of you have questions about the events of this exercise. You've witnessed capabilities that challenge your understanding of human performance. You've seen shot placements that your training tells you shouldn't be possible. You deserve answers. He paused, letting the tension build before continuing. Specialist Wren Ashford, call sign Storm-Falcon, please step forward. The crowd parted as Wren moved toward the front of the room. Her bearing had shifted subtly, the careful anonymity she had maintained giving way to something that commanded attention without demanding it. She stopped before Morrison and rendered a salute that carried the precision of someone for whom military courtesy was sacred ritual. Morrison returned the salute with matching formality, then did something that sent shockwaves through the assembled observers. He reached out and gripped Wren's hand with both of his own, the gesture carrying emotional weight that exceeded standard military interaction. "Welcome back, Chief Warrant Officer Ashford," his voice thick with feeling that decades of command experience couldn't entirely suppress. "We thought we lost you in Syria. 3 years of believing that Phantom Division had been completely eliminated. 3 years of mourning warriors whose sacrifice we couldn't even publicly acknowledge." The revelation hit the room like artillery. Chief Warrant Officer, Phantom Division, 3 years of believed death. The fragments assembled into a picture that made Crestwood's earlier mockery seem not just inappropriate, but catastrophically ignorant. "The reports of my death were accurate at the time they were filed, sir." Wren's response carried the particular flatness of someone discussing trauma that words couldn't adequately contain. "The enemy believed I died with my team. Maintaining that belief was operationally necessary for the extended mission that followed. 3 years undercover in hostile territory." Morrison addressed the assembled observers, his voice carrying the weight of classification levels that most of them would never achieve. 3 years of gathering intelligence that has prevented attacks, identified networks, and saved lives that will never know how close they came to destruction. Chief Warrant Officer Ashford has served this country in ways that will remain classified for decades, and she has done so while carrying grief that would have broken lesser warriors. Lieutenant Hollister had been standing near the edge of the assembled group, her face cycling through emotions that ranged from shock to fear to something approaching panic. The woman she had sabotaged, whose career she had attempted to destroy, whose capabilities she had dismissed as fraudulent, was being publicly honored by an admiral whose authority extended to levels that could end careers with a single word. "Lieutenant Hollister," Morrison's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts like a blade. "Step forward." The command left no room for hesitation. Hollister moved toward the front of the room, on legs that felt disconnected from conscious control. The assembled observers watched with the particular attention of people who sensed that justice was about to be served. During this exercise, Chief Warrant Officer Ashford documented multiple instances of deliberate sabotage, unauthorized scenario modifications, and coordinated harassment designed to compromise her operational effectiveness. Morrison's voice carried the flat precision of someone reading charges. Ammunition tampering, exercise parameter alterations that endangered personnel, systematic efforts to discredit a decorated officer whose service record exceeds anything you will achieve in your career. "Sir, I can explain," Hollister's voice cracked with desperation. "I didn't know who she was. I thought she was just another contractor trying to shortcut the system. I was protecting standards that you were protecting nothing except your own insecurity, Lieutenant. Morrison's interruption carried contempt that seemed almost physical. The investigation into your conduct has revealed a pattern of behavior that extends beyond this exercise. Falsified service records, blackmail of subordinates, systematic obstruction of personnel whose capabilities threatened your position. He gestured to the military police officers who had positioned themselves near the exits. Lieutenant Vera Hollister, you are hereby relieved of duty pending court-martial proceedings. Specific charges will be detailed in formal documentation, but I can assure you that your military career has effectively ended. The MPs escorted Hollister from the operations center, while the assembled observers watched in silence that communicated collective satisfaction. The woman who had mocked Storm-Falcon's call sign, who had sabotaged her equipment, who had spread rumors designed to destroy her credibility, was being removed in disgrace while the target of her conspiracies stood honored before an admiral. The justice you just witnessed is only the beginning. Next week, another ordinary contractor walks into a room full of generals, and what happens will leave you speechless. Subscribe with all notifications on, because these stories of hidden warriors are exactly what this channel delivers every single week. Technical Sergeant Mercer had been standing apart from the main group, his expression carrying the particular weight of someone whose conscience had been screaming for hours. When Hollister was led away, something in him finally broke. He stepped forward without being called, his voice carrying across the operations center with the desperate clarity of confession. Admiral Morrison, sir, I need to report my own involvement in Lieutenant Hollister's activities. The statement drew immediate attention from everyone present. Mercer's face showed the ravages of internal conflict that had been consuming him since Wren's arrival, the battle between self-preservation and the honor that had once defined his service. I provided assistance to Lieutenant Hollister's sabotage efforts. I questioned Specialist Chief Warrant Officer Ashford's credentials publicly when I knew exactly who she was. His voice broke on the admission. She was my student, sir, years ago, before Phantom Division, before any of this. I trained her. I recognized her the moment she stepped onto the range, and I betrayed her because Hollister had photographs that could have destroyed my career. Wren's expression shifted as Mercer spoke. The anger she might have felt was tempered by understanding that came from knowing the pressures that could corrupt even honorable people. Hollister had wielded blackmail as a weapon, and Mercer had been a victim as surely as he had been a participant. The photographs. Morrison's voice carried the particular interest of someone whose investigation had just received valuable intelligence. What did they contain? Nothing criminal, sir. Just compromising. Situations from a deployment that could be misinterpreted. Hollister knew they would end my career regardless of context, and my wife's cancer treatment depends on my pension vesting in 14 months. The confession completed, Mercer stood awaiting judgment with the particular resignation of someone who had accepted whatever consequences his choices had earned. The operations center remained silent as Morrison processed the information and its implications. Sergeant Mercer, Wren spoke before Morrison could respond. You were the best instructor I ever had. The techniques that allowed me to make today's shots came from foundations you built during my early training. Whatever you did under Hollister's coercion doesn't erase that contribution. Chief Warrant Officer Ashford's assessment carries weight, Morrison acknowledged. Sergeant Mercer, your confession will be noted in official records along with the mitigating circumstances of coercion. Given your cooperation and the testimony Chief Warrant Officer Ashford has provided regarding your historical contribution to her development, I'm inclined toward administrative action rather than criminal proceedings. The relief that crossed Mercer's face was immediately replaced by something deeper, gratitude that exceeded the professional courtesy of reduced punishment. Wren had defended him despite his betrayal, had acknowledged his contribution despite his failures, had demonstrated the kind of character that made her capabilities meaningful rather than merely impressive. Thank you. The words emerged as whisper, directed toward both Morrison and Wren. I don't deserve that consideration, but I'm grateful for it. The formal proceedings concluded with Morrison addressing the assembled group one final time. His voice carried the weight of lessons that extended beyond the specific events they had witnessed. What you've observed today represents a reminder that capability doesn't announce itself. The most dangerous operators, the most skilled warriors, the most valuable assets often appear in forms that challenge our assumptions. Chief Warrant Officer Ashford endured public humiliation, equipment sabotage, and coordinated harassment while demonstrating skills that exceed anything most of you will encounter in your careers. He paused, letting the words settle before continuing. The lesson isn't that you should treat every unknown variable as a potential legend. The lesson is that professionalism demands respect, regardless of apparent qualification. The lesson is that arrogance blinds us to capability that doesn't match our expectations. The lesson is that true excellence serves without requiring validation. Morrison turned to face Wren directly. Chief Warrant Officer Ashford, on behalf of Naval Special Warfare Command and the grateful nation you have served beyond any reasonable expectation, I offer formal recognition of your continued service and sacrifice. Your assignment here is officially concluded, though I suspect the evaluation report you'll be filing will generate significant changes in how this facility operates. Thank you, sir. Wren's response carried the particular formality of someone whose mission was transitioning toward conclusion. The facility has dedicated personnel whose professionalism was evident throughout. The failures were systemic rather than universal, and the recommendations I'll provide will focus on structural improvements rather than individual condemnation. The gathering dispersed slowly, participants processing revelations that would reshape their understanding of capability and judgment. Conversations erupted in clusters throughout the facility as operators compared observations and adjusted assumptions that had been built over years of service. Crestwood found Wren near the equipment storage area, where she was conducting final inventory of the gear she had used throughout the exercise. His approach was hesitant, the confident swagger that had characterized his earlier interactions completely absent. Chief Warrant Officer. The title felt strange on his tongue, inadequate compensation for the disrespect that had preceded it. I want you to know that what happened today changed something in me. Not just the shooting, not just watching you save my squad. The whole thing. How you handled the mockery, how you performed when it mattered, how you defended Mercer even after what he did. Sergeant Crestwood, the measure of a warrior isn't found in their best moments. It's found in how they respond to their worst ones. Wren met his eyes with the gray-green steadiness that had characterized her responses throughout the ordeal. You have capability that deserves better application than intimidating people who don't match your expectations. The question is what you'll do with that capability going forward. Teach me. The request emerged with desperate sincerity. Whatever training produced what you demonstrated today, whatever mindset allows that kind of performance, I want to understand it. Not to become you, I know that's not possible. But to become better than I am. The training that produced these skills isn't something I can transfer in a few sessions, Sergeant, but the mindset? Wren allowed a small smile to touch her features. The mindset starts with understanding that true excellence serves without requiring validation. That capability is responsibility, not privilege. That the loudest voice in the room is rarely the most dangerous. She paused, considering whether to offer more. If you're serious about learning, find me after you've spent 6 months treating every person you encounter with the respect they deserve, regardless of their apparent qualification. After you've practiced seeing capability rather than assumption. After you've demonstrated that the lesson of today has changed behavior rather than just conversation. 6 months. Crestwood nodded slowly, accepting the condition. I can do that. I will do that. Then we'll talk. Wren extended her hand. Until then, Sergeant, serve well. The handshake that followed carried weight that exceeded the physical gesture. A warrior who had spent years building identity around superiority, accepting guidance from someone he had dismissed as a liability. A beginning rather than an ending. Private Locke approached as Crestwood departed, his youthful face carrying the particular satisfaction of someone whose instincts had been validated. Ma'am, I knew there was something different about you from the moment you retrieved that cap from the dust. The way you moved, the way you didn't react to the mockery, that's not how civilians respond to that kind of treatment. You have good instincts, Private, Wren acknowledged. Trust them. They'll serve you better than assumptions based on appearance. Ma'am, can I ask, the 7 stars on your tattoo, they represent your team, don't they? The ones who died in Syria? The question touched grief that Wren carried like a second heartbeat. Rodriguez, Martinez, Chen, Williams, Thompson, Okonkwo, Petrov, 7 operators whose capabilities had exceeded anything the enemy expected, whose lives had been traded for intelligence that someone in Washington had decided was worth the price. They do. Her voice remained steady, but something in her eyes acknowledged the weight of the question. They were the finest warriors I ever served with. Their sacrifice allowed me to complete a mission that will save lives for years to come. Carrying their memory is the least I can do to honor what they gave. I'm sorry for your loss, ma'am, and I'm grateful you survived to be here today. My squad is alive because of you. Your squad is alive because they served together, covered each other, and trusted their designated marksman to do her job. The credit belongs to everyone who contributed, Private. Never forget that. The evening settled over the Nevada facility with the particular stillness that followed significant events. Personnel who had witnessed the day's revelations processed implications that would reshape their approach to service. Conversations that would normally focus on equipment and tactics instead explored questions of judgment, assumption, and the nature of true capability. Master Chief Thorn found Wren on the observation deck as the sun painted the desert in shades of orange and crimson. The view stretched toward mountains that marked the boundary of the training area, their peaks catching final light that would soon surrender to approaching darkness. Mind some company, Chief Warrant Officer? He approached with the particular respect of someone who understood he was addressing a legend. Not at all, Master Chief. Wren gestured toward the adjacent railing. The view is worth sharing. They stood in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching colors shift across the landscape as day transitioned toward night. The peace was genuine, earned through trials that had tested capabilities and revealed character. I served with Phantom Division operators once. Thorn finally spoke. Years ago, during an operation that officially never happened. The things I witnessed exceeded anything I thought humans could achieve. When I saw your shooting today, when I recognized the tattoo, I understood I was watching that capability again. Phantom Division was created to do things that conventional forces couldn't accomplish. Wren's voice carried the particular weight of someone discussing sacred history. We operated in environments where detection meant death, where precision wasn't just preferred but absolutely required. The training was brutal. The selection eliminated 98% of candidates. Those who survived became something that most people don't believe exists. And now, after 3 years undercover, after losing your team, after everything you've sacrificed, now I teach. Remrin allowed a small smile to touch her features. The skills that Phantom Division developed are too valuable to die with us. I've been evaluating facilities like this one, identifying instructors who can carry methodologies forward, building programs that will produce the next generation of operators who serve without requiring recognition. The evaluation you mentioned to Admiral Morrison, what will your report contain? Structural recommendations, protocol improvements, personnel assessments that highlight both failures and successes. She paused, considering how much to share. I'll note that a Master Chief with 30 years of experience recognized capability that others missed, that a young private trusted his instincts despite pressure to conform, that even people who participated in harassment showed capacity for change when confronted with evidence that challenged their assumptions. Ann Crestwood, the sergeant who led the mockery, has potential that's being wasted on ego maintenance. If he follows through on his commitment to behavior change, he could become an exceptional operator. If not, he'll plateau at competence without ever achieving excellence. The sun completed its descent, leaving the desert in the particular darkness that preceded moonrise. Stars emerged overhead with the clarity that came from distance from civilization's light pollution. The Milky Way stretched across the sky like a river of light that had witnessed countless warriors across countless generations. Chief Warrant Officer, I have one more question. Thorn's voice carried a hesitation that suggested he was approaching something personal. The operation in Syria, the one that cost your team, do you know who compromised you? Wren was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried cold certainty that suggested the question had never been far from her thoughts. Not yet. But I will. The person responsible for my team's death is still out there, still operating, still trading lives for whatever currency they value. Finding them is unfinished business that I will complete regardless of how long it takes. If you need assistance with that business, you have allies you might not expect. What you demonstrated today earned you respect that extends beyond this facility. Thank you, Master Chief. When the time comes, I may take you up on that offer. The encrypted phone in Wren's pocket vibrated with incoming communication. The frequency was reserved for priority contacts whose messages demanded immediate attention, regardless of circumstance. Storm-Falcon, She answered with the designation that had been mocked hours ago and honored minutes ago. "We have a situation developing." The voice belonged to someone whose identity remained classified beyond the clearance of anyone present except Wren herself. 3 Phantom Division operatives who were conducting similar evaluation missions have gone missing. Last contact was 37 hours ago. Their designated call signs have been flagged in foreign intelligence traffic in ways that suggest compromise. Connection to the Syria operation? Confirmed. Analysis indicates the same source that sold your team's position is now actively hunting surviving Phantom personnel. You're likely on that list, which means your current location is potentially compromised. Wren processed the information with the particular clarity that came from training, designed to function under maximum stress. The mission she had completed today was ending, but a new mission was beginning, one that would bring her closer to the answer she had been seeking for 3 years. Timeline for extraction? Helicopter en route. ETA 43 minutes. Admiral Morrison has authorized full operational support for the investigation. You'll have resources, intelligence, and backup. But you'll also have a target on your back that makes today's exercise look like recreation. Understood. Storm-Falcon standing by for extraction. She ended the call and turned to find Thorne watching, with the particular understanding of someone who recognized operational communication when he witnessed it. New mission? The mission that never ended. Wren gathered herself for the departure that would carry her toward dangers that made today's exercise seem simple by comparison. Someone is hunting Phantom Division survivors. 3 operatives are missing, and the person who killed my team is finally making moves that will allow me to find them. Be careful, Chief Warrant Officer. Whatever you're walking into sounds significantly more dangerous than anything we face today. Master Chief, today was evaluation. Tomorrow is justice. Wren's gray-green eyes carried something that hadn't been visible during the exercise: cold determination, predatory focus, the particular stillness of someone preparing to become exactly what their enemies feared. The person who destroyed my team believed they eliminated Phantom Division completely. They were wrong. Storm-Falcon survived, and storms don't apologize for the destruction they leave behind. The helicopter arrived at 21:17 hours, its rotors cutting through the desert night with sound that drew attention from personnel throughout the facility. Wren boarded with the economical movements of someone for whom such transportation was routine rather than remarkable. As the aircraft lifted away from Nevada's training grounds, she allowed herself a final glance at the facility where her capabilities had been revealed and her legend had been confirmed. The operators below would carry the lessons of this day forward, would teach others what they had learned about assumption and capability, would contribute to the next generation of warriors who served without requiring recognition. The pilot adjusted course toward coordinates that didn't appear on any public navigation system. Whatever challenges waited at the destination, Wren would face them with the same precision that had characterized her entire career, the same cold certainty that had allowed her to survive 3 years undercover in hostile territory, the same dedication that had made her the most lethal sniper American Special Operations had ever produced. Storm-Falcon was returning to active duty, and somewhere in the world, the person who had murdered her team was about to discover that some ghosts refused to stay buried. The justice she served would be absolute. The skills she possessed would be unleashed without the restraint that evaluation missions required. The enemy who believed Phantom Division had been eliminated would learn that assumptions were dangerous things, especially when applied to warriors whose capabilities exceeded imagination. 2,400 meters in a sandstorm, 7 teammates carried as stars across her shoulder. 3 years of grief transformed into purpose that nothing could deflect.